Two stalls stand at the end of the road. One is run by a man you know. The other is run by a committee you don't. You only need one apple. It seems like a simple choice. You'd think it would be. The first man, let's call him Joe, has a simple setup. A wooden table, a pile of apples. Some are big and shiny. Some are small, a little bruised. He grew them himself on his own land. He sets his own price. If you want a bargain, you can try. If you want to help him for a day, he might pay you what he thinks is fair. The money he makes is his to keep. Simple. The second stall is different. It's neat, organized. All the apples are the same size, the same perfect red. A sign lists a fixed price. No bargaining. This stall is part of a town co-op. The rules were decided by a group. The apples have to be a certain type, grown a certain way. The profits are shared among everyone who works the land, based on a formula they all agreed on. The price is kept low, affordable, the sign says. You're just standing there. You want an apple. But you feel a weight in this choice, a pull in two directions. One feels like freedom, the other feels like fairness. One is a risk, the other is a guarantee, and there's a strange tension in the air. The two stalls are far apart, as if they're afraid of each other. You get the feeling this isn't just about apples anymore. It never was. That choice, the apple, is the same choice we make as a society. We just use bigger words for it. We call them capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is a system where people own their own stuff and run their own things. It's Joe's apple stand. You decide what to make, who to work with, and what to charge. To get bigger things done, people form groups, companies, and they compete with each other. The belief here is a simple one. This competition, this striving, creates a lot of wealth. Not just for the founders, but for their partners, their employees, and for everyone else too. It's a tide that lifts all boats. The core of this idea is individual freedom, the right to build your own life, to take your own risks, to keep what you earn. The supporters of this idea, the capitalists, have a deep fear. They look at the other stall, the organized, rule-bound one, and they see danger. They believe that when you give power over money and property to a collective, to the state, it won't be used for the good of all. They think the people in charge will help themselves first. Then, they'll limit individual freedoms to keep their power, making everyone dependent on government programs. They see a future where the drive to create is smothered by rules, and society becomes poorer for it. On the other side, there's socialism. This is the town co-op. The idea here is that government officials should get things done. They set the rules. They regulate what we can and can't do. They often own some property and offer social services for everyone. Socialists believe that political leaders can create a system that shares a nation's wealth fairly, and that this fairness makes all people better off. It's a system built on the idea of the collective good, a safety net for everyone. The dream is a world where everyone has the same access to education, the same standard of living, and benefits from state-funded services. A world without extreme poverty or obscene wealth. The socialists have their own fear, a deep one. They look at Joe's apple stand, at his freedom to do whatever he wants, and they see a different kind of danger. They believe that if people are allowed to keep all their money and power, they will act selfishly. They'll abuse their power, pollute the environment, and make life miserable for everyone except the very rich. They see a future where society splits into two classes, the powerful and the powerless, a world of winners and losers where the losers are left with nothing. So you have these two big ideas, both born from a desire to make life better for everyone. One says the path is freedom, the other says the path is fairness. One is built on the individual, the other on the group, and they are terrified of each other. Each sees the other's dream as their own nightmare. What's strange, though, is that they both agree on one thing. Both capitalists and socialists seem to fear big business. The capitalist fears that big companies will use their money to get the government to write laws that kill off smaller competitors. The socialist fears that those same companies will use their power to write rules that benefit only themselves and make everyone else worse off. One is pro-market, the other is pro-state. But both are wary of power getting concentrated in too few hands. It's a strange piece of common ground. Almost makes you wonder. So, who is right? The numbers should tell us. They should make it clear. But they don't. Let's try to find an answer. We can look at countries all over the world. None of them are purely one thing or the other. They all exist on a spectrum, a mix of these two ideas. We can measure them, see how free their economies are, and then see how wealthy, happy, and equal their people are. First, let's look at a map of economic freedom. Think of this as a measure of how capitalist a country is. Higher freedom means fewer rules, lower taxes, more private ownership. When we look at the data for 177 countries, we see a clear pattern. Some places are highly free, some are in the middle, and some are not free at all. For example, Singapore ranks at the top, Switzerland is second. The United States, maybe surprisingly, is 25th. And at the very bottom, the least free place is North Korea. Now, let's bring in the money. We can measure wealth using something called GDP per capita. It's a rough measure of how much stuff the average person in a country produces in a year. When we compare this to economic freedom, a picture emerges. The countries with more economic freedom are, almost always, richer. The ones at the top have wealth that's hard to imagine, close to $200,000 per person. Singapore, the most free, is also at the top for wealth. Switzerland is 7th. The US is 14th. And North Korea is again dead last. The connection seems clear. More freedom, more money. Case closed, you might think. But hold on. It's not that simple. Are these countries wealthy because they are free? Or are they free because they are wealthy? Maybe a country that gets rich from, say, discovering oil, then has the money to create stable institutions and protect freedoms. And what about other things? A country's history, its culture, its natural resources, whether it's been torn apart by war. All these things affect both wealth and freedom, independent of what economic system people choose. The numbers show a connection, but they don't tell us the whole story of why. Let's look at something else, something more important than money: happiness. How happy are people in these different systems? The map of happiness around the world looks a lot like the map of wealth, but with some strange exceptions. Countries with higher freedom do tend to have higher levels of happiness. Switzerland, which is free and rich, ranks 4th happiest. But Singapore, which is even richer, is only 27th. And people in some relatively poor countries are surprisingly happy. People in Venezuela, a country with very little economic freedom, report being relatively content, which doesn't seem to fit the pattern at all. It seems freedom and wealth can help make people happy. But maybe the real test is equality. The main promise of socialism is fairness. A society where the gap between the rich and poor isn't so massive. We can measure this using something called the Gini index. It tells us how much of a country's wealth is held by its richest people. When we look at this map, the whole picture just dissolves into chaos. Rich, capitalist countries like Singapore and the United States are very unequal. That might fit the socialist fear. But then, socialist societies like Venezuela and China are also very unequal. The most equal country in the world is Slovakia, which is a moderately free, mixed economy. And the most unequal society is South Africa, a place that is rather unfree and has a painful history of racial segregation that has nothing to do with this debate. When you plot inequality against economic freedom, you can't see any clear trend at all. None. It's just a messy cloud of dots. It seems that neither capitalism nor socialism is very good at creating equality. So what do we have? We have two sides, each promising a better world. We have data that seems to show that one side is better at creating wealth. But when we look at happiness, the picture gets blurry. And when we look at equality, it's a total mess. The numbers don't give us a clean winner. They don't resolve the argument. If anything, they just make it more frustrating. It feels like we're trapped in a faulty equation. We keep trying to solve for X, but nothing adds up. We keep score. Team Capitalist, Team Socialist. But the scoreboard is broken. The game might be rigged. Maybe we've been watching the wrong players all along. We ask, which system works better? We assume that's the right question, but what if it's not? What if the choice between these two ideas is a false one, a distraction? A story we are told to keep us busy while something else, something much more important, is happening. What if the real fight isn't about who owns the Apple stand? What if it's about whether you have any choice at all? Let's step back. Let's forget the labels for a minute. Forget capitalism. Forget socialism. Think about power. In any society, who has the power? Who makes the rules? And who can tell them no? There seem to be two real answers to that question. In some places, power is held by the people. They can argue, they can vote, they can protest. The government has to, at least sometimes, listen. The rules can be changed. There are limits on what the powerful can do. We can call this a democratic system. In other places, power is held by a small group of people. A dictator, a king, a single political party. They make the rules. They don't have to listen to anyone. There are no real limits on what they can do. If you disagree, you can be punished. We can call this an authoritarian system. Now, what if this is the real divide? Not left versus right, but up versus down, free versus controlled. What if the question of who owns the factories is less important than the question of whether the factory workers can form a union? What if the debate about how much tax the rich should pay is a sideshow to the real issue, whether you have any say in how that tax money is spent? It's a different way of looking at the world. It reframes the entire problem. And suddenly, some of the messy data might start to make a little more sense. Let's look at the numbers again, with new eyes. Let's forget the words capitalist and socialist, and just use the labels democratic and authoritarian. Where do countries fall? North Korea is at the bottom of every list: freedom, wealth, happiness. We called it socialist. But its defining feature isn't its economic policy. It's the total suffocating control it has over its people. It is an authoritarian state. Now, think about the countries at the top. Switzerland, for example, free, rich, and happy. We might call it a mixed capitalist economy. It has huge private banks and companies, but it also has very strong social programs and one of the most direct forms of democracy in the world. Its defining feature is that its citizens have immense power. What about a country like China? Its economy has become much more open in some ways, with private businesses everywhere. By some measures, it has embraced parts of capitalism, but it remains a deeply authoritarian country ruled by one party, and its inequality is very high. What about Russia? After the fall of the Soviet Union, it moved away from state socialism. It has private firms now, but power is concentrated in the hands of a few, and the state is heavily involved in the economy. It's another authoritarian system. Now the confusing data points start to look a little clearer. Why are some poor countries happy? Maybe because they are vibrant, if messy, democracies. Why is a rich country like Singapore less happy than you'd expect? Maybe because it is an incredibly efficient and wealthy state, but also one with very tight social controls and limits on personal expression. The pattern isn't about economics, it's about control. It seems the societies that do well, the ones that are both wealthy and happy, are the ones that manage to combine a market economy with a strong democratic system. They use the engine of private enterprise, but they put guardrails on it. They allow people to get rich, but they also have a system where citizens can vote for social safety nets and regulations to protect the environment and workers. They aren't capitalist or socialist in the pure sense. They are messy, complicated, democratic societies. The real failure isn't choosing the wrong economic ism. The real failure, the one that leads to poverty and misery, is letting power fall into the hands of a few people who cannot be questioned or removed. It doesn't matter if those people call themselves communist or fascist or the chairman of a board, the result is the same. the loss of human agency. This changes the whole map. It's not a line with capitalism on one end and socialism on the other. It's a grid. On one axis, you have economic systems. On the other axis, you have political systems. And it looks like the political axis, the one that measures how much say you have in your own life, is the one that matters most. It's a useful story, this fight. It gives us a team to cheer for, an enemy to blame. The arguments are simple, they fit on a banner. Freedom, equality, they feel good to shout. While we are busy arguing about who should own the factories, someone else is quietly writing the rules for everyone. While we are locked in a bitter debate about the size of the government, powerful groups are lobbying that same government, no matter its size, to bend the laws in their favor. Who benefits from this distraction? Who benefits from a world where people are divided into two angry camps, unable to see the common ground they share? Who benefits from us believing that the person who voted for the other party is our mortal enemy? Think about the one thing both sides seem to agree on: a fear of big, concentrated power. A fear that large corporations can become so powerful they essentially capture the government and rig the system. Well, what better way to ensure nobody stops you than to have the population fighting a phantom war? If you can convince one half of the country that the other half is trying to turn the nation into Venezuela, and convince the other half that their opponents want to create a world of cartoon supervillains, they will never talk to each other. They will never realize they are both being squeezed by the same forces. They will never unite to demand a system that is both prosperous and fair, both innovative and stable. Every society has a shadow, a part of itself it doesn't want to look at. For those who champion pure freedom, the shadow is the cruelty of leaving the unlucky behind. For those who champion pure equality, the shadow is the oppression of forcing everyone to be the same. The current fight forces us to live in that shadow, to defend the worst parts of our own ideology. It keeps us angry, it keeps us scared, and most of all, it keeps us from looking up, from seeing the bigger game that is being played. So we look at the two apple stalls. We argue about which one is better, which one is more fair. We spend our lives on this debate. We choose a side, we defend it. We teach our children that the other stall is not just wrong, but evil. But we never turn around. We never look at the person who built the road, the one who owns the whole market, the person who takes a quiet cut from both stalls, no matter who is having a better day, the one who smiles and encourages the argument to continue.